Hey everybody, how's it going? Happy, what's today? Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. And good to see everybody here. My goodness, it looks like, oh wow, who is here? Nick! Nick Hyde, what's happening, man? Yeah, it's, this is a thing Nick has been working with for a long time. And it is a thing that I have not really dipped my toe into this water very deeply. Although those of you who were here for the intro, the music it was playing, I wrote that and recorded that. Obviously, those are synths. Sarah's here too. Awesome. So Sarah is our special guest this week. And yeah, that's it's a little thing that I did with synths a while back. It is one of like 2 things that I've done with synths in my whole life. But here we are. So where are we? Okay, back to, sorry, I'm hitting lots of buttons today. We're going to be talking about synth pedals this week. It's our Effects on Violin series, which I've been having a lot of fun with. Those of you who have been hanging out with us for a few minutes know that we are hitting a different effect each week. And we'll kind of cover all the nerdy, the general information. What is this effect? What are the parameters? What are the different buttons and knobs that come with this? And then we're going to have, most weeks we have a guest artist that is going to kind of help us out with these different effects. I'll talk about the mechanics of it, and they'll talk about the art of it. This week is the amazing Sarah Hubbard. And next week is Matt Manweiler, oops, wrong button. Matt Manweiler, who is also here. What's happening, Matt? Thank you for showing up and for all the help that you gave me in putting this thing together. I do not do a lot of synths. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I did want you guys who are here and are like, okay, you talk synths. What are these synths that you keep talking about? You heard some on the intro, and here is another quick video. This is the intro to the 4th movement of the Denenzone Electric Violin Concerto. You're going to hear a synth sound, and then a clean sound, and then 2 more synth sounds. And then we'll get into more of this. So here is an example of some sounds that you can make with synths. All right, for those of you who are just joining us, that was an excerpt from the Denenzone Electric Violin Concerto, the 4th movement, and it is just kind of a demonstration of some different sounds you can make with a violin and synth pedals. Our guest this week is way better at this than I am, and we're going to listen to 2 examples that she sent me on different things you can do with synth pedals, and then we will get into the nuts and bolts of this whole thing. So here's Sarah Hubbard. could listen to the Flobots all day long. That's amazing stuff. Thank you, Sarah, for sending that stuff. And man, all the cool people are here. Rob Flax is here. You guys are making me nervous. These are people who actually know what synths are and what they do. I'm hanging on by my fingernails here. All right. So first of all, what are synthesizers? It is what the name says. Synthesizing something means making something new, often from using existing stuff. And so that's what we're doing. We are making a new sound from existing sound. And like I have told you guys, I'm not a synth guy. I've sort of dabbled in them, like just dipped my toe into the water. I lean very heavily on a website, explain that stuff. And I listen to Matt Manweiler, and I've learned a lot of stuff from Rob Flax as well. And yeah, let's see, put in here, Rob is here. It's the wall decoration keyboard. Yes. Yeah. Rob is another one of those guys who does a zillion different things with synths. And we're going to have him as a guest on our Fuzz Week. So I had to holler at some other people this week. Rob is one of those people who knows a lot of things about a lot of things. So we have to use him sparingly. But first things first, when we are synthesizing something, we're going to pick a frequency, and I'll actually get into detail about what all these things are. We're going to pick a frequency. We're going to pick a wave shape. And sometimes you're going to repeat that as necessary to add some harmonics and some complexity to the sound. We're going to use subtractive filters, and we're going to use some envelopes. And we will talk about what all of these things are. And I'm sure Rob and Matt and Sarah and all these folks are going to keep me honest in the comments section. Yeah, if I say something that's wrong or dumb or whatever, don't be even remotely shocked. Just look in the comments section and these guys will fix all of that. So you guys know what frequency is. We're going to pick a frequency between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz is what the human ear can hear, assuming you haven't been standing on loud rock stages your whole life. And then harmonics tend to be multiples. So if we've got a 200 hertz sound, the second harmonic or first harmonic up is going to be 400 and then 600 and then 800. And I want you to hear what those sound like. Here's a 200 hertz sound, and then you hear 4, 6, and I think 800. So those are all those harmonics. And here's what happens when you combine them. They happen at the same time. So that's where sounds start to get more complex, and they start to develop these overtones that help you understand, like, these things all sound different. Of course, we're familiar with sine waves, but real sounds have overtones. That's why a saxophone at 440 hertz and a cello at 440 hertz sound different, because they have different overtones. Those overtones are really just more sine waves sort of added in here. There is a video that we're going to show real quickly that we know about sine waves, but there are other shapes of waves too. There are triangle shaped waves and sawtooth waves and square waves. And even at the same frequency, they all sound different because of the overtones that are needed to create them. So here we're going to hear a sine wave and then some different shape waves all at the same frequency. So you can hear when we say we're going to pick a frequency and a shape, this is what we're talking about. So all of those sounds were at the same frequency. It was just a different wave shape, and that's what makes them sound different. So as we're getting in, and just as a warning to you guys, we're going to get a little bit mathy on this, and then we will sort of pivot to talk about what synth pedals do. If we get a little bit under the hood in what a synthesizer is and sort of the different things that are involved in synthesizers, then you'll understand better what these synth pedals are doing for you and why they all sound so different. Okay, So the next thing is an envelope, and that's basically a graph of volume versus time. So we've got attack, decay, sustain, release. As string players, we're very, very familiar with this type of thing. We call it articulation. You know, if you ease into a note, which gives you a long attack time, or if we jump into a note with a very short attack time, we know that that sounds different, right? It has a very different characteristic. If you pick your bow off the string and let that violin resonate, that's different than choking it out. So that's altering the envelope of the sound. And we do this with our bow. Synthesizers do it with an envelope filter. So that is another way that we change these sounds. So the next big thing, and I'm leaning very, very heavily on Matt Manweiler here, word for word, believe it or not, is using subtractive synthesis. We use an oscillator to create this primary wave shape, this very complex sound. And then we can use filters to alter those primary wave shapes and have them follow the pitch of a controller. And he sent some videos that I'm going to show you rather than just that little short where we're going to show you this is what a square wave sounds like at 400 hertz. If we create a waveform, then you can sweep the frequency of that type of waveform and it's going to give you a different sound. So the top display on this is an oscilloscope, which is going to show you the shape of the waveform. You're going to see that change as the frequency changes. The shape will be the same, but obviously they get a lot closer together as you go up in frequency. And then the bottom display is an analyzer, an RTA, showing you a plot of frequency versus volume. So here are a couple of different wave shapes that he's going to sweep from low frequency to high. All right, so you can hear that's what happens. You take different wave shapes and then sweep the frequency up and down. I'm going to get to some of these comments in just a second. There are some really, really helpful things here. The next video is where we start talking about subtractive synthesis, where he's going to take a low-pass filter. So we've got this very, very complex sound, all these different frequencies happening, and then a low-pass filter is what allows the low frequencies to pass and the high frequencies to be cut. We're going to start, I think it starts with the low pass all the way down to the bottom. We're only allowing the very, very lowest frequencies to pass. And then it sweeps up, which allows more and more frequencies to pass, and then comes back. So it's going to open this whole window up and then close it. And then there's one with resonance and one without resonance. So when we talk about a low-pass filter, usually allows the low frequencies to pass, and then it rolls off, right? When we say resonance, it means that there's a peak right at that roll-off frequency, so it sort of adds an edge to that sound, and it allows you to really hear where the edge of that roll-off is. That's called resonance. So we're going to listen to a couple of these, and then I'm going to get to these comments. So we're going to hear a couple of sort of very complex sounds that we're going to roll down this low pass filter and then roll it back up. And then, yeah. So on that, you could see on the RTA at the bottom, you could see that sort of thing walking across, that little hump walking across as that the resonance was going up and showing where the edge of that roll-off is. Next week, Matt Manweiler is going to be our guest, and we're going to go much, much deeper down the hole of what all this stuff is. I know this thing is all very, very intimidating. There's a huge learning curve here. But when we're talking about synth pedals, the stomp box pedals, they do have some controls on them, but they do a lot of this work for you. And let me get to some of these comments here. Yes, fuzzes and synths, basically ways to create pulse waves. And then Rob says, highly recommend the Synth Secret series, Sound on Sound magazine. I will need to dig into that a little bit. A deep primer on synths is easy to read in 63 parts. Okay. And yeah, Sarah's saying that's where she's done a ton of her learning. Matt as well. So yeah, obviously a good resource if the smart people are reading that. What's up, Danny? And yeah, I probably should have given you guys a warning. If you're listening on headphones, a little late now. If you're listening on headphones, warning. It's going to get interesting. All right, so where are we back to? Let me see if I can find where I was here. All right, there are a couple of different classes of synth pedals. There are those that require a separate output for each string, and there are some that can just use a regular 1/4 inch input. The ones with a separate output for each string, let's see if I've got one hanging on. Yeah. If you see a violin that has this output on it right here, this type of output, that is a multi-pin output that's got a separate. So the reason this bridge is made the way it's made is because each one of these strings is sending a separate signal. And it's sending it out of this and can go to a Roland GR55 or some other guitar synthesizer. And it can do pitch tracking on each of these strings separately, right? That's what we call MIDI violin. That's outside the scope of this video. We will not be talking about that today. What we will be talking about are the pedals that can use a 1/4 inch input. And those are kind of divided into monophonic and polyphonic. The monophonic ones, only one note at a time. And the polyphonic ones can do more than one note at a time. And yeah, exactly right. Let's do this thing right here. Everybody sing happy birthday to Rob Flax. Everybody do it at a different tempo and in a different key. That would make Rob very happy. I know it would. So yeah. Where am I back to? All right, mono versus poly. So these synth pedals, they all tend to have some kind of presets in there that have selected oscillators, waveforms, filters, all that stuff for you so that you don't have to get super, super deep under the hood. I feel like it's important to understand at least a little bit of what's under the hood so that you know what you're monkeying with. Basically, what I've done with synth pedals so far is I just kind of, like a monkey, I turn the thing, I don't like that. Turn it here, like that better, so turn it further. That's kind of what I've been doing with synth pedals without really understanding what's going on underneath. You can do it that way, but it would be better if you actually understood what was happening. You'd probably make better sounds if you do that. So synth pedals will use the note that you're playing as a fundamental frequency. They will have to identify the pitch of the note that you're playing, and then they will manipulate that in order to create the synth sound that they're making. The ability of the pedal to accurately detect the pitch that you're playing in a timely manner is what we call tracking. Does this pedal track well with the violin? And that's going to be a really important thing to understand with each of these different pedals. When you'll see people say, well, this pedal doesn't track well, or this pedal does track well, what they mean is, does this pedal accurately and quickly identify the pitch that you're playing with the violin, and then is able to manipulate that pitch in a way that is more predictable and less like surprising and funky. So these synth pedals do allow you to customize your tone to a significant degree, all while kind of maintaining a relative ease of use so people like me can actually drive these pedals without understanding synths to the level that Matt and Rob and Sarah do. That's why I like synth pedals, because it can kind of get you a lot of these really funky sounds, but you don't have to understand that much about synths in order to get them. Because there are zillions, like literally zillions with a capital Z, there are zillions of possibilities for the ways of sounds that you can get from these things. Each pedal is going to approach that a little differently, and you're going to have to experiment to find the pedal that does the thing that you want it to do. If you've got a specific thing in your mind, I want to make this kind of sound, you're going to have to do some work to find the pedal that can make that sound if you're wanting to do this with a pedal and not with actual analog synths where you're plugging cables and doing all that stuff. So, as far as the mechanics of this, where do we want to place this in our signal chain? We want to be pretty early in the signal chain. Maybe not first. You might want to do a little bit of prep work on your signal to give the pedal the best chance of tracking your sound. You might want to do some EQ, try to thin up your sound a little bit so that the pedal has a better chance of tracking your sound. If you have a very complex sounding instrument, you might want to EQ a lot of that complexity out to help the pedal do its job. You may even want to get some compression in there. Yeah. So you're going to have to experiment with how to prep your signal so that the pedal can track the best. But in general, the synth pedals, you're going to want it pretty early in your signal chain. And then, like I forgot to warn you guys that are wearing headphones, be aware that synths add lots of frequencies to your sound, both high and low. You're probably going to want a full range speaker system with a sub. Plugging this into like your little practice amp, or if you're running like a Fender Twin reverb or something that has a fairly limited frequency response, it's probably not the best way to really hear what these synths are doing for you. So you're definitely going to want a full range speaker system, probably with a sub, if you want to get the full benefit of the sound that these synths are making. All right. So all of that is kind of some prep work to say, okay, how do synth pedals work? What do they do? What's happening under the hood? If you guys want more information on this, come back next week when Matt Manweiler is going to be discussing this in a much greater level of detail. And yeah. Oh, I should say this. Let's do this very quickly. Yeah, happy birthday to Rob. He is going to be playing acoustic instruments. Man, that's not a good birthday present for yourself. But Rob is having a live stream tonight. Rob, if you want to drop a link into the comments section here, everybody will be able to come join you on your birthday live stream, and that would be amazing. So, okay. Let us set up this discussion with the artist of the week. Sarah Hubbard is a fantastic violinist who lives in Colorado. She plays with everybody and their brother. She plays incredibly wide range of styles. She's a ridiculously good soloist. She's a ridiculously good player, makes amazing sounds, is very, very entertaining. Can't say enough positive things about Sarah. But this is my chat with Sarah about synth pedals, and you're going to hear, if you guys are just joined the stream here, we're going to replay the example of her demonstrating one of these synth pedals, and then there'll be a little bit more later on. But yeah, y'all grab a frosty beverage. This is a 38 or so minute discussion. She had a lot of really amazing things to say, and I was like, I'm not cutting any of this. This is really good. All quality entertainment for your Wednesday afternoon. Yeah, get comfortable. Kick your shoes off. Grab a nice glass of milk or something. Love to know how you sort of started exploring synths. What made you want to do that, and what was like, oh, I want to do this?
Yeah, I had seen a show, and I guess it's a little different, but I saw a show where Somebody was using MIDI and violin in a pretty cool sort of pop context. And that's where I began to think about, oh, how do we transform this instrument so it's almost unrecognizable? And there are certain ways that I was doing that already with distortion, with other effects, but this idea that you could really take the instrument and move it becomes almost like a cryptid, like you just don't recognize it anymore. That fascinated me. And I think the B part to that is you can kind of see behind me my theremin. um, I had been getting very into just theremin and a little bit of analog synth stuff outside of the violin. There's a big violin to theremin pipeline I noticed. So, um, for what that's worth. But I was beginning to play around with learning about oscillators and envelopes and what are all of these terms used in synthesis and creating sound and being able to think about, well, how do I move this onto the violin, because I'm doing this in other places with keyboards and with the theremin. I also played a little bit of digital theremin as well. So there was a point at which I was like, how do these two worlds come together and collide? And so I landed on picking up a couple synth pedals over the last while, and it's becoming a little more and more of an obsession.
So are you using this like in your own private projects, or using this with the Flobots? How are you using this?
Mm, it's funny. We haven't had a lot of instances in previous. We're writing a lot now with the Flobots, where I'm using this in more now for future stuff with them. They've traditionally had a much more organic sound with their previous violist, with me now, and now we're sort of playing around with newer sounds, more synthy sounds. I actually found synth pedals really useful for blending into more pop projects. It's funny because it's such an ostentatious sound that you get out of some of these pedals. I have a couple in front of me, and they're very, when you hear one, it's just like it grabs you kind of by the jugular. But I found it's actually useful for camouflaging into pop, into a background of synthesizers. There's a pop project I work with right now where we're doing a lot of stuff in Ableton, and we're triggering samples on our push. And there was a moment where I realized the kind of, not necessarily dry, I was using effects, but the sound of a violin as it is began to sound like, if when you show up to a costume party but you didn't wear an outfit, everybody else did, and like you feel a little out of place. So there was a point at which I was like, I actually want this very ostentatious um, pedal with a lot of bravado to kind of create a little more texture, a little more color for the instrument to blend in with what's going on in the synth patterns underneath it, with these like drum machines. It began to become another color to play with, another texture to play with, another flavor to play with in different pop projects. And then also with like I work with a band where it's this is not the bulk of what I'm using for tone, but there are moments where things um, they just start wiling out at the end of a song. They're opening up into this kind of like psych rock um, flavor, texture, pattern, and having the synth pedals for that to just have new colors to play with is very useful, I find.
Yeah, what pedals are you using? And yeah, show us some of the stuff that you're messing with.
Yeah, so I'll start. There's sort of I feel like this is kind of a common baby's first synth pedal. It's the Boss SY1 synthesizer pedal, and it actually packs a real punch. There are other models that are a little more advanced from the Boss. They have another one that has, I think, 50 more sounds on it, the SY2. But it has a lot. I think it's like they've said 121 sounds, something pretty crazy, which you can get a lot of mileage out of. And there's things that are like more string synth sounds, which I know everybody has like a hot take on like, well, does a string synth sound below? I mean, aren't we trying to get away from that? But I think there's a time and a place. There are more lead tones. There's actually really cool sequencer that you can basically be plugging in chords. Like, so uh, if you're playing like double stops or strumming out chords, you can sequence this. And then this is a little more applicable, I think, for guitarists, but there's you can hold and freeze it. um, we have a little more decay, but especially if you're plucking, maybe not. You want to use that. And then there are ways of affecting whether or not you have more dry signal coming through. So you can kind of sound like there's synthesizers blooming under you. You can get these tones blooming under you, or you can have more just the straight synth sound coming out of it. And yeah, there's a lot in here. Bell tones. There's you can do synth bass stuff with it, and then there's not just like one sound for each one. There's like a whole knob wheel you can be dialing in really different sounds with, which I love. And affecting depth, affecting tone. Um, there's not a whole lot that you can, well, okay, there's a lot you can do, but it's not quite as customizable as far as like going in and changing the waveform as you can on some pedals. But it's, to me, it's like it's a really good beginner, not even beginner, I mean, anybody can really use this. Um, it's a great pedal for creating um, synth sounds, especially if you're not familiar with all of the language that's used in what goes into a synth pedal.
I had never really
Cool.
messed with synths before. It was never a thing that I'd plug into one and go, okay, that's cool, but I don't really need this. Until I did the Denizone Concerto. The fourth movement of the Denizone Concerto was just screaming for it. And so I used like 3 or 4 different synth sounds in there. And I really had to adjust the way I played because of the way the pedal reacts. What have you found for that?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Like, so did you find, because tracking is obviously a really big part of what comes into a synth pedal, was that something that you had to sort of be accounting for?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the synths that I were using were monophonic. So if you accidentally bump another string or something, it's going all haywire, and you have to be super super careful with some of them about any extra noises you make, or you can't slide into this note, or like they all react differently to the way you play.
That, yes, I'm so there with you. So that's something I find with the Boss. It's not super violin friendly on that front. In the same way, like I just noticed that it's picking up everything and open strings too. I mean, being muting everything after you're playing is something that I found uh, is very useful with working with that pedal. The other synth pedal I use is the Maris Enzo. I just love this thing. It's so great. And what's really cool about this, there's so many cool things, like, but what I love about it is it has a couple different modes. So there's actually a monophonic mode. There is a polyphonic mode. You can trigger in ARP mode, where you can be sort of similar to the sequencer on the Boss, playing chords sort of over. And the tracking on this is really, really great. And then there's also a dry mode where you can be using some of the effects without the oscillators triggering the synthesizer. So you can use like the kind of ring mod or some of the other things on here, just dry. But the monophonic mode, I found the tracking just for like single lines really, really effective and really great on here. And there's also, so there's an alt mode where you hold down a button and you can go into some of these knobs and play around more. And one of them has this portamento. Um, so you have you can be sliding into notes, which is amazing on here. And it tracks pretty fast. Like the responsiveness is, I feel like I could be like playing like a reel or some kind of really fast fiddle tune and it would probably pick it up pretty well. Um, but there are things that commute differently off of into this pedal off of your playing. So like if I play like a slurred triplet really fast, like a synthesizer doesn't know about slurs. It just like it doesn't innately get that. So it's going to start each note. It's going to sound like almost staccato in the way that like each note starts, the envelope starts, and you're getting it's like da da da, even though it doesn't feel that way. It's a little out of body in that way. So when you're playing, you expect one sound and you're getting sonically something different. And it's cool too, depending on if you, I really like playing through these with the mix sort of all the way into the synth, like no dry signal coming through, just synth. I just think if you're going to use it, go big or go home. But there is something cool about having both textures together. So you have, if you were to move the mix dial sort of a little bit, say over here towards like 3 o'clock, you'll still get a little bit of that dry signal coming through, mostly the synth. But it's neat that you'll hear, if you played that triplet again, you'll hear almost two textures against each other, which I love. Yeah, there are certain things you have to be careful about. Muting everything too is just like in between playing. I find this less of a problem with monophonic lines, but with polyphonic stuff on here, that can be a real hazard, because depending on what key you're playing in, if it's sort of picking up, and I notice this especially, I play, you might see back here, my Volta, my dear Volta. But yes, I love it so much, but it does seem to pick up a little bit of just the openness of it. It's not solid inside. There are electronics, and there's a little bit of hollow inside of that instrument. So mileage may vary, like on a Viper or on an NS. That might be a bit of a cleaner. It might not pick up the open strings in the same way, I assume. But something that I figure you kind of have to account for as you move through the pedal and play around with it.
So do you find that putting it very, very early in your signal chain is the way to go?
Yes, yeah. I wouldn't want, well, first, it just needs a lot of your signal. Like it needs your attention. The tracking can get very muddled if it's behind anything. So you wouldn't want to put like something like distortion or reverb or delay in front of it. This is the first thing after my tuner pedal, and then everything else comes after. And I do find I'm not really always using these with other effects. I know some people do, and there have been some really cool sounds I've gotten, like with the Boss, playing around with. There's like organ tones on here, and then adding some interesting delay or distortion on top of that has created some, like, or overdrive has created some really neat tones that I wasn't getting out of here. But there's so much going on here that I feel like I'm like, oh, I almost have enough to play with right here. But yeah, early in the signal chain is so important, because otherwise you're going to be, it's going to be struggling to pick up what you're putting down.
Yeah, I was using one of the synth blocks in the Helix, so I did an EQ block first and dumped as much as I could. All the low frequency stuff that I could, dumped as much high frequency stuff as I could to give it the cleanest, narrowest signal to work with, to give myself the best chance of triggering it properly.
And I haven't worked with I haven't worked with the Helix, period. It's kind of my next frontier. But how is the synth, how are like the synth blocks in there? How do you like those?
Yeah, they're good. It was, for me, having everything in the box was important, because Ableton was doing so much of controlling of the Helix. Having external pedals was kind of going to defeat my purpose. They're okay. They're not as good, I think, as or as controllable as some of the outside pedals. If you're really a synth nut, you're probably going to want to work with outside pedals.
Mm, right. And but the cool thing, I mean, thinking about the synth nut at like that was something that I felt like, well, I'm not really a math girl. I'm not really a huge synth girl when I was getting into these. And a lot of people who are very deep in that world, I mean, we just saw this past weekend, how deep in that world you can go. Matt Manweiler had an amazing set at the Electric String Summit after Asta, which was really, really cool. Modular synthesis, huge rack, and then violin. So there's like obviously this infinite well that you can be digging into. But at the end of the day, the cool thing to me about synth pedals are that like you can be learning a lot of this stuff. You don't need to know everything about how this works. It's very daunting. You don't need to know all of this when you go in. You will probably learn it because there's just no other way around navigating these pedals. Even if you intuitively learn it and don't have all the names for everything, you're going to figure this out pretty quickly. You'll understand why something opens up and doesn't open and closes when you hit a knob. What is that doing to the filter? What is that doing when you hit the modulation? Like, why does that suddenly sound detuned? There are so many things that are just you'll begin to understand attack and delay and or decay, and it'll make sense. But there's something really cool about being able to navigate the space and almost think of these as like they're almost these living, breathing little creatures on your pedal board. Because there's so much about them that's intangible, that feels like this response you wouldn't expect. In the way that when I hit a delay pedal or I hit distortion, like sometimes it's a little hot, but it's not something I'm never getting something I didn't expect. And sometimes with a synth pedal, even when I've dialed everything in the way I thought it was going to sound, there's just this little intangible that I have to troubleshoot, and solve on my end. And that's the kind of the fun of it to me.
That was one of the things that, like, exactly right, the predictability of it. With
Mm.
distortion and the stuff that I use a lot more, I know how it's going to act. We've spent enough time together. I know how it's going to act. With the synth stuff, I don't feel like I had nearly as much control over what was going to come out. And part of I had to sort of shift my mentality to be like, man, whatever happens, happens. That's actually part of it. The unpredictability is part of it. And you have to embrace that and just go, well, this is what we're doing.
Exactly. It's so chaotic. But that is sort of the fun of it. And not knowing exactly what you'll get out of each pass through is it's so delightful to me. There are definitely times when I would forego a synth pedal, for certain things if you really, really need that predictability. But you can dial them in pretty well. I feel like there's, and these the ones I've been using are pretty navigable on that front. I think it's a little tough when you're managing, especially on the Enzo. You managing the alt mode as well. There's just like you're kind of dealing with another layer under your first layer of controls, but it's all really, really fun. And there's a lot of different synth pedals too on the market. They all kind of do different things. These sort of are, it feels like the Boss is like your most sort of like quintessential, the Enzo as well. But then there are talk box synths, like TC Helicon makes an actual synth pedal that replicates like a talk box. I haven't seen a violin hooked up to using that, but that's kind of cool to me. There was one a few years ago that was they tend to also fall into meme category kind of. There was one that was a Vocaloid synth pedal. If you're familiar with those, they're this in Japan. There was a software that was made probably like almost 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And it's basically before AI, you could create these computer generated voices that had syllables, and you'd be able to create input melodies, and they would sing, but they would sound like as you would expect, like very computer generated. And someone made a pedal that does that, but you can play through it, so it'll like be like na da 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 da, like these
The
really
Miku
funny.
pedal.
Yes, the Miku
Yes,
pedal.
yes. I've worked with a couple people. Joe Denenzone uses one of those.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah. So that's crazy. I'm so they're those are hard to find now. They're like every time I look, they're like it's like an $800 resale. That's cool. That's so cool that he has one.
Yeah, I've seen two
Um,
of them on pedal boards. He's got one, and then somebody came into the shop and was using one. I was like, I know what that is.
that makes me so happy. Somebody should just do a video on those because that I'm so tickled that it exists. But yeah, yeah, I love that it's such fertile ground for creativity. There's so many wacky, fun pedals, some that do some really amazing sounds. I have seen there's the electro harmonics. Their Synth 9 is a really great sounding pedal. I don't have that one, but I have played it a few times and I'm like, wow, this just a lot of good sounds in here. Yeah, and they're all a little different, you know. Some of them are just monophonic. Some of them you can really like tap into polyphony, like the Enzo. Just like get crazy with it. There's so many different possibilities with them.
One thing I've discovered with, like, I guess the more traditional effects, like distortion and reverb and delay and those things, is that you might have a sound in your head and you can kind of go chase after that sound with these pedals. My very limited experience with synth pedals is sort of different from that. Like, you have to just kind of go, well, this is what this pedal sounds like, and either I like this sound and I can play with it some, or I don't like this sound and it's just on to the next one. What is your experience in like discovering sounds with these? Do you have something in your head that you're trying to replicate, or are you just like, well, that's what this pedal does?
Yeah, I so what I'm always after, there's a point at which I will sort of surrender to the pedal, but what I'm often looking for, my kind of default sound that I first try to tap into is something kind of square wavy, almost chiptune. That was something that I first started trying to find on the Enzo and found very quickly, which I really it's just a sound I find is like very adaptable to different things. Being able to kind of sound like I'm in Mario is just fun. Um, so that's sort of like, you know, I guess some people have like a lick that they play when they're like, I'm setting them to the instrument. That's like the first thing I sort of try to find on a synth pedal. Um, but yeah, I agree. I There's a lot of letting the pedal guide me, and letting the pedal's capabilities unearth themselves as I'm playing and figuring that out. Um, I find I don't often lean into the more there's like the longer decay, longer sustain kind of pad like sounds. I'm not always using those as much as I probably could. There's a lot of really cool synth sounds that come you can really be expanding. Oh, I'm so sorry. Our dog is yelling.
Hey, buddy, come here. Come say hi. Oh,
Oh my
good boy.
goodness. The mailman came, and that's just an event every morning. I think there's a point of like, there's so much you can command out of them, but there are limitations to them. Sort of letting the synth be what it is would probably be my default after I've like tried to tap into like how do I make this sound like a video game. And after that, it's like yeah, you know, it does have a life of its own. It does create its own sonic landscape. But there is something very fun about chasing it like as much as you can and dialing as much in, especially on something like this where there's just so much you can customize within a sound and you can be trying to dial in. At the end of the day, though, it's sort of like the difference to me about between like using a synth pedal versus just being like, screw it, I'm gonna go and get a whole Euro rack and like, I mean, that's the point, right? Is like we looked at that and we said that's really cool, but I don't know if I have the time or the money or the patience to like sort through a lot of cables and you know, you look at one of those and you're like, that looks like my worst nightmare. Like this could be very, very difficult. It's really cool, and it's also like a lot of gear to travel with, a lot of, so you do kind of sacrifice a little bit of that with these, but I don't even know if I use the term sacrifice. It's not a negative thing. There are a lot of happy accidents on the pedals, I find.
Yeah, Matt Manweiler is going to be a guest on here in a few weeks. We're going to talk about whatever it is that he does. But his show in Louisville just last week, like he brought in a full computer and this massive monitor, and there's like 400 cables, and I'm having an anxiety attack just looking at it.
Yeah, it was really fascinating to watch him set up as well. Because I mean, I know there's just so much going on there, but there's like it's cool to just see wherever, like, try to be processing and following, and also watching him play and trying to figure out like, okay, where is like he's triggering drums, like what is he doing for, like how is that happening, and he's triggering all kinds of really incredible sounds that like I almost wanted an overhead video of his setup as he was playing, because trying to figure out from before the show and then after the show what I remember seeing of the rig, watching him live from, you know, eye level, it's like there's so much going on there. So I can't wait to see what he has to talk about, because that world is vast and I am very much not, I'm safe ashore and he's on the deep end, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I am. I'm way out of my element on that. And again, I don't really work much with synths. I've been doing a lot of research before, this conversation, and before I've got to put together sort of an explainer for people on what synths are and how do they work. And I had to learn a whole lot about this before I feel like I can even speak intelligently about it.
There's a lot. I mean, I still feel like I'm learning a lot about it. I'm very DIY, I suppose. Like I've been teaching myself over the last couple of years. There's a lot of information, like there's a ton out there, and some of it is communicated very dryly on the internet. Some of it it's like okay, and some of it I think there are a lot of good analogies used. Like at one point, I remember watching a video years ago where, because I was having a really difficult time understanding the concept of envelope, and it was like, well, think of it like literally it envelops the sound, and it like it's turning this, it's the thing that is shaping the sound, if you think of it that way, because the term envelope doesn't really encapsulate what it does, and we think about like letters, so it's just a very different way of approaching sound. And I mean, as violinists, I don't think we're actually so distant from, we have different terminology, but we are, we, even the way we organically produce sound, things like vibrato, you know, like it's not so different from what we're creating on synths, and the synthesis of actual sound waves. Like we just have like the old fashioned way of doing it, you know, on an instrument. But I don't think it seems daunting, and I don't think it's like a horribly difficult thing initially to get into. Then there are levels of you see what Matt Manweiler's doing and you're like, oh my God, I'll never get this. There's so much of this. But eventually you do get there. I feel like that rabbit hole just goes deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, I mean, as violinists, the ability to control the envelope, and for the people watching, it is the volume of your sound with respect to time, right? So here's your volume and here's time. So imagine you're easing into the note. Well, the envelope would start here and sort of open up. If we attack that note, like with a hard bow or a pick, like a guitar, it would start very high. We've been controlling the envelope of our note since we first picked up a bow, right?
Exactly.
But do you feel like you're sort of giving up or maybe transferring some of that control to the synth pedal, because now it's controlling the envelope of what's going on? Maybe you're giving it an initial hit, but then it's kind of taken over from there. What is it like to sort of share control or hand over control with the pedal? Isn't that kind of a different mindset?
Yeah, I never really thought about like your brain is half of it, but this is the other half. Yeah, it is a little out of body. There's a point at which when I've played around with this enough and I've spent enough time on this, I now kind of know what I'm expecting. And especially knowing the terminology better than when I started, and knowing my vocabulary in the synth world better, I can dial things into where I think they're going to be and understand most of what I'm going to hear, save for sometimes a few little unexpected discrepancies, happy accidents. But there are times when when I'd start playing, and then I would have no sustain and no decay, and so I'd be like trying to hit a long note, not knowing sort of kind of what I was expecting out of a wave, out of a sound, and like there it stops dead, and I'm like, what is happening? Yeah, how is this going on? Or conversely, I'm plucking something expecting these like little blippy kind of chiptune tiny sounds, and then all of a sudden the sustain is going on forever, the decay is going on forever, the attack was very soft, and like it's fading in, and I'm like, why is this happening? So there is a point at which now that I have this more dialed in my own head and I understand more of what's happening here, on the pedal, I can expect reasonably what I'm going to get, but there is something kind of fun about being able to let this take over at some point. And I mean, it's sort of, we were talking to the point we were talking about before, like what sounds are you chasing, or are you letting them sort of uncover themselves through playing around with this? I find there is a point, I would say it's like an 80-20, where I at this point now, maybe 85-15, where I'm pretty dialed into where I want it to be, and then like the rest of it sort of goes from there. But there have been times with, even especially when I'm trying to develop the right lead tone for a solo or something, um, where I've thought that I really wanted a very like uh, closed sound or something, and something much brighter came out, and I thought, no, that's perfect for what I'm doing right now. This is the right sound, you know. I don't know. Have you run into the same thing with synths? Have you found that they're kind of commanding some part of your brain as well?
Yeah, totally. And it's we've always said with other effects that you have to understand that the thing that's, and for me, it's a Viper. So the thing that's strapped to your body is an instrument, but then all the stuff underneath your feet, that's an instrument too. And you have to learn how to play that instrument in conjunction with the one you're with, the one in your hand. I think with synths, it's even more that way, right?
Totally, totally. Especially the things, I mean, the fact that you can arpeggiate out of these, you can kind of trigger chord. Some synth pedals, you can play one note and it'll trigger a chord based on it. And like there are things about it that really are suddenly out of your own brain and in the brain of something else. And it's not less creative for that reason. I mean, especially if you are really navigating this and learning what you're doing and employing it in cool and musical ways, um, it is thinking not for you but with you in that way. I find there are things when I hit the sequencer mode on the Boss, or if I hit the ARP mode on the Enzo, there are things that come out of that, that it might pick up chordally, especially on playing with violins, because they track a little bit differently than the guitars that I think these are designed for initially. Um, like things will come out of that sonically, harmonically, even that I wasn't hearing. Um, and that's actually kind of a cool happy accident too. Like sometimes it just feels like, oh, that's an accident. Like, but there are times when it's like, no, this is actually really cool. I didn't hear it this way. It tracked an open string I didn't realize was vibrating, and that's actually a much cooler color in this chord that I wasn't expecting. Yeah, it's thinking, we're thinking in tandem, I think. And most of the time when you work with it a lot, you end up on the same page.
I think it's a cool window into how the creative process in your brain works too. When you hear certain sounds come out of the instrument, it will trigger different thought process. Like you'll play licks that you would have never played before. Like, where did that come from? That's not a thing that I would have played with just a clean violin tone. Like my brain wouldn't have gone there.
Right. Totally. And something I just really, really love about these is like there are so many sounds that you wouldn't necessarily chase after initially, but when you have, um, it's like there's synthesizers have this inherent nostalgia to me. I mean, you grow up kind of hearing them in different places. They're much we think of them kind of as this like futuristic sort of thing, but they're so old. They've been around for a very long time. Uh, so it's like there are sounds that I suddenly find myself trying to replicate from childhood that were synth lines from like a Saturday morning cartoon or something that's in the back of my head. Just these like sort of things like um almost this like what do I say? What's the thing? Like not what's like a Pavlov's bell response, like kind of like that you're not quite the same thing, like not the dog salivating or whatever it was, but like you hear this sound and like suddenly you want to like play it back. Um this is not a great analogy. But like I'll hear something and suddenly I'm trying to like play some lick from like a TV show I haven't heard or watched in like 25 years, but it's somewhere in my childhood brain. And like, there's just a lot about them that I find I'm constantly trying to recreate certain things too. And hearing a sound elsewhere, trying to sit down and dial in on one of these, something close to it. Even if just for fun, I think is really really exciting.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. I
Yeah,
really appreciate you taking the time. Where can people find you? Where can they find your music? Yeah, how can people follow you and support you in your art?
awesome. I will thank you for having me. I am so excited to be talking about synths and all things synth. My name is Sarah Hubbard. I go by at Sprightly Sound on most social media. That's SPRIGHTLY Sound. I play with a band called the Flobots. They are a hip hop band out of Denver. I also play with an electronic project called Mr. Knobs, as well as a rock band called Shady Oaks and a country artist named Buckstein. All of these, not so much the country artist, but most of these I use synth pedals with. um, and yeah, so you can find a lot of my various genre hopping, dimension hopping music on those through those different artists on Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal or wherever people are streaming now. And yeah, and I'm also on TikTok at Violin Fairy. That's my one handle that's different than the rest. Sarah Hubbard Music, www.sarahhubbardmusic.com. That's Sarah with an H. So yeah.
All right. Awesome discussion. Love Sarah. She's a fantastic player and artist and thinker and just a really fun hang. Wanted to mention here from Matt Manweiler. He is teaching a session on this at Fiddle Hell. If you guys have not been to Fiddle Hell or you don't go to Fiddle Hell, you should. You should be at Fiddle Hell. Fiddle Hell's amazing. The online, I think this is online. Definitely go check that one out. I know they have some of those in person and some of them online. I think this one is online. And also Nick Hyde. Yeah, there's a lot of great little nuggets in there. Sarah's amazing. So definitely check out her and her stuff. The Flobots, love the Flobots. So I hope that is at least gives you guys an idea of what's going on with synths and synth pedals. And next week, I know I've said it 100 times, but we're going to go a little deeper next week and do synth week 2. And then I don't know what's coming after that. I know fuzz is coming at some point. I think we're going to do one on physical amps. We are going to do one on modulation effects. We're going to do, I'm trying to remember what all the other things are. We're going to do one on the Eventide and what it does. It's a whole class in and of itself. It's really hard to even describe what the Eventide is. They call it a harmonizer, but it's really more than that. So we're going to do a week on that. Yeah, we got a few more of these to go. So we're on week, 14 now? And I think we're probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 by the time we're done with this. And it may not be every week. I know we do have one coming up this week, but I may miss a week here and there. I know I've got to get a discussion in here with my buddy Ben Karras. He's got a lot of really cool stuff going on. We'll probably talk to him about some things. But yeah, I think we're probably going to be in a neighborhood of 20 different videos in this Effects on Violin series. And hopefully it's given you guys a chance to get acquainted with some really cool artists that are doing really cool stuff too. If you guys have not caught all of these are the different weeks that we've been talking about and the artists that have come in to talk about kind of their favorite effect and how they use it in their art. So yeah, I think we got probably another good 5 or 6 of these coming. So, all right, I'm going to bug on out of here. I got stuff to do, man. I got important things happening in my world. So that's going to be that. I will see you guys next week. And yeah, we're going to learn more about synths together.